It is possible to store long-term storage, food storage, like these dry goods, for almost free if you know how to do it. Hey Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene, and today I'm going to teach you how to store long-term food storage really cheaply. And with the price of food and everything that's going on, having food storage just makes a whole lot of sense. But a lot of us have a lot of budget restraints, which means that we need to look for ways to conserve. If I can do it with cheaper packaging and still get the same results, then I can actually store more food. So let's talk about this really quick. So one of the least expensive places to get food storage that's already packaged in these fantastic number 10 cans, and this is actually the best way, you'll get the longest shelf life with it, is from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have what they call home storage centers all over the United States, and you can drive to one of them, you don't have to be a member, and you can buy food storage already in the cans like this for really inexpensive. Now, there's a few things that cost more in these cans, but quite frankly, if I buy black beans from there, I can get them already in the cans cheaper than I can buy them at the store. So you do have to do a little bit of price shopping, but you can also order them online. It does cost more because there's shipping involved, but that is one inexpensive item. You can totally go to like Augustin Farms and a bunch of different places and get your food storage in cans like this, but it really adds up. And sometimes you just have to look for less expensive ways to do it. So today we're gonna talk about 3 of them, and I'm just gonna review it really quick, and then I'll show you in detail how I do it. So glass jars, super fantastic. And like this one, this is a repurposed pickle jar, right? You have to wash them really, really well, and you wanna make sure that they don't have any odors in them that will, like this is flour, and this was originally a Nally's pickle jar. So if you didn't clean it really well, my flour is gonna smell and taste like pickles, so you wanna avoid that. But we wanna use an oxygen absorber in it, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. This is a peat bottle. So on the bottom, it says number 1 with the recycling symbol, and peat, either P-E-T or P-E-T-E. And there have been studies shown that this will maintain a low oxygen environment of less than 1% for at least 1 year. Now, who knows how long it will really do it, but the study only lasted for 1 year. This is some wheat that I've had in my storage room since 2006. And actually this is really cool because I bring it up from the basement and I can just dump it right in the wheat grinder. But this is still like super fantastic. It's perfectly good. We don't drink a lot of soda, and so we don't get this option very often unless we can get somebody else's recycled stuff. Now, this one might surprise you. This is actually a Mylar bag. This is a black Mylar bag. But you can reuse these Mylar bags. And a lot of times Mylar is good because if you're doing a lot, you might only have so many repurposed containers that you can use. This currently was opened by one of the kids, so it wasn't opened very nicely. It has some linguine in it. But what you do with this is you would just cut off the top, and if it has a zip in it, yes, you're gonna lose the zip. But you're gonna cut off the top, you're going to clean it out really well, and then you're gonna repackage it and heat seal it again, right? And it's gonna get smaller and smaller every time. But that means that instead of 1 use out of this bag, you might be able to get 4 or 5 uses. So let's get busy and let's start talking about glass. Now, first we need to stop for just a second and talk about good candidates for long-term food storage. Those are foods that are low in moisture, less than 10% or less, and low in fat. Fat goes rancid in storage, so you wouldn't want to store brown rice for long-term storage. It would be great for short-term storage, but you're going to want to do white rice if you want it to last in storage. There is a website, and I will leave a link to it in the description of the video, that will tell you how much moisture certain foods have in them. It's a super great resource, but check it out and make sure. I'm not going to want to store like dried apricots, the nice wet moisture kind in this way at all. So just make sure that we're using the right candidates. Now there are a couple things that affect the food in food storage. One is oxidation, and that will break down the food very quickly. That is one of the reasons why we use oxygen absorbers. And let me just show you really quickly. I'll open these. I really like Wallaby. Their oxygen absorbers. One of these bags is a 400 cc and one's a 500. Now, I just use those for anything 1 gallon or less. Realistically, I only need 100 cc's for a quart jar, but it's a pain to have a whole bunch of them open at one time. And this way, what'll happen is if I put a 400 cc oxygen absorber in here and I close it up tight, it's only going to use about 100 cc of that oxygen absorber up, and then the chemical reaction will stop. When I open it up and take some out, and then close it back up, that reaction will start again and it will remove the oxygen. So that's super cool. One of the reasons why I like Wallaby is because they come in packs of 10. And that means that I don't have to have very many open at once. And what I do is I always open that and then immediately put them in a small mason jar so that they don't start working right. They'll absorb the moisture or the oxygen in here, but then they'll stop. So for me, that's really important. That is what I do. Now with the glass jars, they are subject to breakage and they're also subject to light. So you need to store them in a dark place and protect them from getting broken. But what you're looking at right here, well, except for this one, is from John's sister. She had texted on the family text and said, hey, I've got some extra canning jars. Does anybody want them? And I'm all over that because now I have, some fantastic containers to store more food in. We talked about this as a pickle jar. This one is actually a maraschino cherry jar. But there are all kinds of jars that would be good candidates that normally you're going to throw away. Spaghetti sauce jars, those kinds of things. You need to wash them out really, really well. Hot, soapy water, and make sure there's nothing in it. And then what I do is, in fact, click the link in the card in the corner and I'll take you, and I'll leave it in the description of the video also. But we wrote a post and made a video about how to clean this because it's best if they're sanitized, right? You want to make sure that you're putting it in a completely clean, dry container. So all of these, like I said, are free. There is rust around these rings. I really don't care. It's still going to keep it on tight. And I will reuse these lids because now I'm going to look at them and make sure that they're clean, right? If they've got any mold or if they've got a little chip out of them or something doesn't look quite right, I'm not going to use it. But for dry goods, I'd never do it with wet pack, but for dry goods, I'm completely fine with that. The other thing when you're using canning jars is you could vacuum seal them, and that would be totally acceptable, and then it's not quite completely free, but pretty darn close. So we talked about there's two reasons why you need to use an oxygen absorber. One is to prevent oxidation in storage. The second one is insects, because in this bag of beans, it is very possible that some little critter is in there and would like to multiply in this. And by putting an oxygen absorber in, we take the oxygen level almost non-existent in there, and life cannot survive. So if there's insects or eggs, they're not going to be able to multiply. Right? They're for all intensive purposes just dead. So that's why we want to do it. Now some people ask, well, do you need to freeze it first? The only reason why you would want to use the freeze, thaw, freeze method is if you are not using oxygen absorbers, and that only takes care of the insects. So don't put this in the freezer unless you're not using oxygen absorbers. And if you are going to do that, make sure you go to that link about glass canning jars, and in there will tell you exactly the appropriate way to do it. So now, what I like to do with these is to put the oxygen absorber, and that's kind of the nice thing too. See, it's good for that 2-quart jar, it's good for the quarts, and it's good for the pint. I'm gonna put an oxygen absorber in the bottom of each one of these and stick this back in this right away. And now I'm just going to fill these up. And I like to put it in the bottom instead of the top because, okay, I'm kind of greedy and I want to get as much in there as I can. And I don't want to have to leave room for the oxygen absorber at the top. So as soon as I do that, and I've shaken it down. That's all it takes. This is on nice and snug, right? And now you should notice, or you should find that within a few hours, at least 12 hours, you're gonna see that this lid pops down. Sometimes, for some reason, the wide mouth will seal, but they won't actually pop down. I'm not at all worried about that. So let me fill these, and I'll be right back. Okay, it's that fast. Like, put the oxygen absorber in the bottom, fill them up, put the lid on. That's it. That's all that it takes to do it in these glass jars, which is super, super fantastic. Now, if you are going to use sugar or salt, do not use an oxygen absorber because it will turn them hard, right? But with things like rice and beans and wheat and flour, you would want to use an oxygen absorber. Now that these are done, this, right now, if you store it in a cool, dark, dry place, you can have a 25 to 30 year shelf life. That's crazy. If you're still storing it in the bags like what's behind me, then your shelf life is going to be really short. Those beans are going to turn really hard very quickly. You're going to have problems with insects, but just by taking a few steps, suddenly you've extended that shelf life for a really long time, and the quality will stay good for a long time. And these jars were free. I only had to pay a few pennies for the oxygen absorbers. Now let's move on to the peat plastic bottles. That's really cool. This has to be, I think, one of the best ways to use something that is a free resource that is just being thrown away and repurposing it for something better. So same rules apply to this with the oxygen absorber. Like this green one wouldn't be as subject to light, but these definitely would be pretty subject to light. Now, you can make a paper funnel. One of the challenges with this is filling it. Now, this one doesn't have a challenge filling it. And think how often you throw these containers away, right? Sometimes if you feel like you don't get a good airtight seal, because these had originally like a cardboard thing in there, and I pulled it out because I don't want any chance for contaminants, and that had some of the other food, and they're a little bit, I don't know, I'm not real comfortable with them. But you can just take a piece of duct tape or electrical tape or any kind of tape like that. Let me tell you, masking tape and painter's tape don't work because they'll come off. But the painter's tape, or not the painter's tape, the duct tape or the electrical tape works really, really well. You just put it on the seal. I've also heard of people, one of our viewers said that what they do is they just get some hot wax and they just take the end and they dip it in the hot wax and then let it cool. I personally haven't tried that, but I totally think it would work. So with this, it's just so similar. It takes a little bit more work, actually, especially these, because it's harder to get the product inside of it. But again, the oxygen absorber, I always put it in first, and then I should put this in here first. Because the bag sometimes is hard to dump from. Oh, I guess I should open it. And remember, we're always starting with quality product. We don't ever want to put junk in here. It doesn't get any better with storage, so make sure that it's high quality. And then see, you have to play with it just a little bit to get it to work. And a paper funnel totally might be helpful. Go to the video that we did on food storage in peat plastic bottles, because we've got some really good demo there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat this process for all of these and put the lid on and label them, and it'll be amazing. And I will be right back. Okay, so these were a little bit harder to fill because of the little narrow neck, but check this out. This is a free resource. I mean, and this one's got its little handle, and then they're refillable. So you use it up, And then you could just do the same process over and over again. And now, of course, someday they're gonna kind of wear out and they won't be good anymore, but what a great way to repurpose something and have a nice long shelf life. Now, this is not gonna have as long a shelf life as glass or as the number 10 cans, but like this is 2006 and it's still okay. So this one is almost 20 years. And it's just fine. I would target this for more like 10 or maybe 15, but so far I've had super fantastic success. Make sure you use an oxygen absorber, but if it's sugar or salt, don't use an oxygen absorber. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention about this. So these containers, I do not have a high level of confidence because they didn't hold liquid before, right? I think this was peanuts and one was Himalayan salt. And so I'm not positive that my seal is going to be airtight. And that's why this has been sealed with some cute little duct tape to make sure that I have an airtight seal. But these, I have a high level of confidence that this seal is just fine. Absolutely, if you want to, you could put that duct tape around here, you could dip it in the wax, anything you want to do to improve this seal. But like this one, yeah. It's been in here a really long time and the seal is perfectly fine. So pretty much if it's held liquid, I'm fairly confident that it will have an airtight seal. But like these, I don't know for sure. So that's why they have the duct tape around them. The next thing I want to talk about is Mylar. Now, Mylar is more expensive, but like we talked about, you can repurpose them, right? So this has a zip seal on it. Now, you can't just zip seal it, you have to heat seal it with an impulse sealer, or this is my hair straightener that still has hair on it. And you're gonna heat seal that top or you won't get the airtight seal that you need. The zip won't provide that. But you can cut it off. The next time you won't have the zip, but you can reuse it and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but you can repurpose it to get more than just one use out of it. So there you go with that. Now, this is Wallaby. Wallaby is my favorite, as you probably know. These are gusseted and the bottom opens up so that they can stand, which I really like. But in this one that they have, this is a new kit that they have, and it has 3 different sizes. And the reason why I think that is really cool is because sometimes you don't want an entire gallon of food storage. Maybe there's only one person, right? Or maybe 2 people, or maybe you're doing a spice or salt, which you might not want a gallon of it, but it sure would be nice in these smaller bags. So it just kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility. And that's the other thing, you know, quite frankly, my favorite peat bottle to use are Powerade or Gatorade bottles because they're just that smaller size. And I'm thinking, you know, if something happens and I need to share with somebody, I'm not going to have any problem sharing a recycled Gatorade bottle, especially because it's smaller, right? The container was free. There's probably $1 worth of rice in there or beans or something, but it could make a difference for somebody else. So I really like that. Now, I'm going to show you a quick little trick. I don't have any open oxygen absorbers. Okay, and seriously with these, now this is a kit, so it came with the oxygen absorbers just like this. And I'm just gonna cut off the top, put them right into my jar. You just don't want these out longer than 30 minutes because they're gonna start working, and let me take one out. They're gonna start working and that's a chemical reaction. Once that chemical reaction's gone, it's spent. Now, this is cornmeal. And I'm going to store it. Remember, if you ever want to check the moisture level of what you're doing, go to the site that I put in the description and you should be able to get a pretty close idea. But I actually want to store this in its original container. And so if I were to just stick the oxygen absorber in here and put the bag in here, it's not going to be able to suck out the oxygen appropriately. So I'm going to tuck it directly in there. But then I don't want this to spill out all over. Wallaby has these super cool labels that come with it, and they are just perfect for closing this with the oxygen absorber inside. Now, the reason why I want to do that is because I don't want cornmeal leaking all over the bag. Do you have to do it? Absolutely not. I just think it's kind of helpful. But because the oxygen absorber is inside here, it's going to effectively remove all of the oxygen from the cornmeal, which is where we want it removed from. And yet I still have the original container. I like to do this with sugar too. Only you have to buy either put it in the 5-gallon containers of sugar or the 5-gallon Mylar bags, or buy smaller containers, because like the ones I have right there, we're gonna have to repackage those differently because they're too big for a 1 gallon. Okay, see how I'm kind of squeezing out the air that I can? And then I'm gonna zip this closed. Perfect. And before I seal it, because this is warming up, I'm going to write on here what's in here. Cornmeal 2022. You can totally put the month on it if you want. Most of the time I don't get that specific because I'm storing these for years, not for months. Well, depends. Rotation, I think, is super important, that you rotate everything regularly and have the highest quality. But sometimes our life is a little bit different and we don't eat as many basics. But we sure like to have them in storage because who knows what's going to happen, right? But ideally, you would want to rotate through all of this. Do you see how I've got that really good seal on there? This is packaged and ready to go. Now, this bag needs to be protected from rodents because mice can chew through it very quickly. But this has now got a 25-year shelf life, right? Well, with cornmeal, I'd probably shoot more for 15 because it's already milled. Any whole products like wheat berries have a longer shelf life than, say, white flour, because white flour has been milled. So because this is milled, probably more like 15. Now let's try some sugar. Now remember, with sugar, we do not want an oxygen absorber because it will turn it hard. We're just going to put it right in here. Tap it down just a little bit. That's the thing that's so nice about these gusseted bags, is they'll stand up straight. And I want to fill it almost all the way, but not quite, because I need to be able to seal this, right? So I'm gonna do the same thing where I'm gonna squeeze out the air the best that I can. And I'm gonna seal that. This is white sugar. (2022) heat seal. Sometimes I like to just tap it first because we don't want to have any little wrinkles in here, right? Just want a good seal. Inspect that seal. Then what I like to do is just distribute it through here so that, there we go, so that it's going to lay a little bit more flat. And now this actually has a forever shelf life. White sugar is never going to go bad unless it's contaminated, and so this has a true oxygen and a true moisture barrier. So the white sugar in here should be good. I have noticed with some of mine that when it gets about 20 years old, it does get a little bit clumpy, but we still use it and the clumps come out when we cook it. So, all right, so now I'm going to work on packaging some of the rest of these. But so the difference in size was really important. But the other thing is, I can only have so many repurposed containers. So if I just keep collecting them and I'm gradually building my storage, that's fine. But if something's happening and there's a crisis and I want to store more because I don't know how much food there's going to be on the horizon, getting something like Mylar bags so that you've got more containers would be a great option. So, and if you, Wallaby is our favorite. We have a promo code that'll save you $5 off, I think $75. We'll put that in the description if this is something that's interesting to you. So let me package this up and I'll be right back. All of these Mylar bags are filled. They have oxygen absorbers in them, except the sugar, which does not have an oxygen absorber in them. We should notice over the next 24 hours that they're gonna shrink up just a little bit. Sometimes they'll shrink up a lot and it'll be vacuum, like really vacuum sucked. But for the most part, they're still gonna be just a little bit puffy because air is like 79% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. And so it's only the oxygen that is being removed from the bag. And that's all that hurts the food. So what we've done here is we've created the perfect environment to make these shelf stable for a very long time. Both of these you're looking at maybe 25 years. This one, maybe 20. So a super great way to use products like this that you would have just thrown away and to store your food so it'll last longer. Now, I highly encourage you never to leave these on your shelf that long. Rotate through them, right? So that you've always got fresh food because it's gonna be higher in nutrients, it's gonna taste better, the quality is gonna be better. It's just a better choice all around. But this is a really great thing. Make sure that you go back and look at the posts that we've written. There's one on storing food in plastic peat bottles. There's one on glass jars, and there's one on Mylar, and it goes into much greater detail. There's also a video on each one of these, and I will leave links to those so that you can see them. So get busy storing food right now while it's still relatively cheap, just so that you have something to eat, even if it's not what you'd really love to eat, just so you have something to keep you alive when things get really tough until they get better again. So for the question of the day, what are some inexpensive ways that you've found to store your food that are safe? It's gotta be safe and effective. Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.